Good morning. I'm J. Lenore Bressler, and welcome to the May 8th, 2017 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. We're talking today, as we were yesterday, about the Garden of Gethsemane, as explained in Matthew chapter 26. I want to turn today to talking about the role of the disciples. This was immediately after the Passover Seder, in which Christ instituted communion, talked about a new covenant, and also alerted the disciples once again, but now in a very urgent fashion, that he was being betrayed by one of them. This was a particularly just emotion-filled, heightened awareness kind of moment, or so you would think. They went out to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Christ put most of the disciples in one location in the garden, and then asked for the inner circle, those that knew him the best, his best friends, Peter, James, and John, to accompany him further into the garden. Now, it's interesting because he wanted his closest companions to be close to him. Isn't that how you feel when you're going through very desperate moments, very desperate times? Even though perhaps they can't help you in tangible ways, there's so many ways in which your friends help you from an intangible way of just being there, and sharing with you as best they're able, whatever the grief or the struggle is. It means so very much. And Christ, the human side of Christ, needed that, wanted that comfort of the camaraderie. And then it says in another gospel account that he went about a stone's throw away from them. And so they could have seen him. He was in eye shot and probably in earshot as well. He had asked them deliberately to stay awake and pray with me. And he had told them straight out that he was exceedingly sorrowful and troubled. In the Greek, these are the most intense words that can be used for those kind of emotions. It means to be absolutely grieved, and he even added unto the point of death. And troubled means to be absolutely as miserable as one can be. You know, Christ not only demonstrated, but he said straight out, he articulated his feelings. And so you would think that these people would be sensitive and would want to do everything they could to stay awake and support him. As I told you yesterday, Christ actually fell down in the dirt, prone, face down before his Father. Surely the disciples, at least the three of them, were in a position to see this. I want to ask you, can you imagine your best friend doing that in your sight and how you would feel about that? The natural inclination is we would think that they would want to do anything to help support this person. But not just because he was your friend, but these inner three had been privy to first-hand witness accounts. They had actually been there to see Christ raise the dead and to see the transfiguration on the mountain. They had seen him in his glorified state. Better than the rest of the disciples, these intimate three knew that he was the Son of God, that he was the Messiah. There was absolutely no doubt to them. They had seen him in his glorified state. They had seen Moses and Elijah there with him on the mountain, to the point that Peter even had wanted to erect sanctuaries so that they could worship them there. And so they knew who he was. They see him under great distress. You would think seeing someone who is the Messiah under this great distress, if nothing else, that would keep you awake. But no, they kept falling asleep. They could not stay awake, even under this highly charged emotional situation, to help their friend who they knew was God or the Son of God. It's really amazing. Now, before we all say, oh, well, that's ridiculous, and if I had been there, I surely would have stayed awake and supported Jesus. Before we do that, remember, we're within hours, maybe a couple hours, of Peter saying to Christ very proudly, very boldly, very self-confidently, if everybody else falls away, I will not desert you. And now he can't even stay awake. It's a sad commentary on our frailness. It's a sad, sad commentary. Now, it's interesting that Christ goes back, as you know, 3 times, finds him asleep every time, and tells him the first time, why, stay awake. Can't you even stay awake for 1 hour? It's interesting, he calls Peter out. They were all asleep, but he asked Peter, could you not even stay awake for an hour? Why that? Well, not just because Peter is the de facto leader of the disciples, but because he had just so recently proclaimed how bold he would be for Jesus. Another time, Christ says to them, stay awake so that you can pray and not enter temptation. It's interesting. Christ, I'm sure, was disappointed in them. He needed them. His human side needed his friends at that very momentous and grievous moment where he was wrestling with the biggest issue in the universe. Was he willing to sacrifice himself and go through the passion of the cross? And his friends couldn't even support him then. Now that's bad enough. But it's interesting that when Christ goes back to them, he doesn't emphasize the part of them letting him down, not being good supportive friends of his. He says that he wants them to pray so that they may not enter into temptation. Do you realize that the reason Christ was able to withstand the temptation in the wilderness and the temptation to walk away from the cross that he encountered in Gethsemane is because he was prayed up? That's really why. You can't withstand temptation if you're not prayed up. The disciples were not prayed up. They fell asleep. And it's not just that they fell asleep physically. This is also, yes, they did fall asleep physically, but it's also indicative of their mental state as well. The lack of alertness, the lack of perception as to what spiritually is at stake or what is going on. And so they weren't watchful. They fell asleep. And therefore, when the temptation would come, when Peter would be tempted to deny, when all of them were going to be scared, they fled rather than stay bold. You have to ask yourself, what if they had stayed awake and prayed? Would they have been so spiritually recharged and rejuvenated that maybe they wouldn't have run away? Maybe Peter never would have denied Christ. Of course, we know these things had been prophesied, so we know that that was going to happen. But that is because it was also known that they weren't going to get prayed up. And my question to you and to me is this: are we prayed up? Are we in a situation where we are ready to endure temptation? Because if you're not prayed up, you won't be. We'll fall as easily as they did. And especially those of us that feel confident that we won't, like Peter, and meaning well, with well-meaning hearts, we may find ourselves the first to fall. So let us do as Jesus did. Get prayed up so that we may endure and survive and triumph over temptation. Join me tomorrow for another look at the Garden of Gethsemane on tomorrow's edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a marvelous day.